My name is Kylie Navarro, and I'm 28 years old. 6 months ago, I learned that sometimes the cruelest truths arrive wrapped in whispers you were never meant to hear. I was standing in a dimly lit hallway at his brother's wedding rehearsal dinner, smoothing down my burgundy dress, when I heard his voice drift through the half-open door of the coat room. My boyfriend, Ethan. He was laughing, that easy confident laugh that used to make my stomach flip. But this time, it landed differently. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. His brother Marcus asked him something I couldn't quite catch, and then Ethan's response came through clear as glass. Come on, man. She's great for now. Sweet, reliable, keeps me grounded. But let's be real. She's just temporary. Once Vanessa gets back from London in a few months, I'm done playing house. The words didn't register at first. My brain tried to rearrange them into something that made sense, something less devastating. But there was no mistaking the casual cruelty in his tone, the way he said my existence in his life like I was a placeholder, a bookmark holding a spot until the real story could continue. I stood frozen, my hands still on the door frame, my breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat. Vanessa. His ex-girlfriend. The one he said was ancient history. The one whose photos he still kept buried in a folder on his laptop that he thought I didn't know about. She'd moved to London for work 2 years ago, and according to Ethan, they'd ended things amicably, maturely. He'd told me she was part of his past, that I was his future. I had believed every word. Marcus laughed nervously. Dude, that's cold. Does Kylie know? Ethan scoffed. Of course not. Why would I tell her? She'd just make it complicated. Look, she's perfect for right now. She cooks, she doesn't nag, she makes my life easier. But Vanessa? That's the real deal. That's the woman I'm supposed to end up with. Kylie's just keeping the bed warm until then. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, but with the quiet finality of ice splitting under pressure. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in. I simply turned and walked back down the hallway, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor. I found my purse, grabbed my coat, and left through the side entrance. No goodbye. No scene. Just silence. Ethan texted me 20 minutes later. Where'd you go? People are asking about you. I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off my phone. That night, I sat alone in the small apartment we shared, the one I'd helped furnish, the one where I'd imagined a future that apparently only existed in my head. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the walls, and I realized something profound. For 2 years, I had molded myself into what I thought he needed. I'd laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I'd canceled plans to accommodate his schedule. I'd convinced myself that being low maintenance was the same as being loved. But temporary. That word echoed in the silence. I wasn't his partner. I was his pause button. The next morning, Ethan came home around 11. I was already dressed, my suitcase packed and sitting by the door. He looked confused, still half asleep, his hair messy from the night before. Babe, what's going on? Why didn't you come back last night? Everyone was worried. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. I heard you, I said quietly. At the rehearsal. Talking to Marcus. His face drained of color. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words that wouldn't come. Then the panic set in. Kylie, wait. That wasn't. I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking around. You know how guys talk. I held up my hand. Don't insult me by pretending this is about locker room banter. You called me temporary. You said I was keeping the bed warm. Those aren't jokes, Ethan. That's the truth you didn't have the guts to say to my face. He stepped forward, desperation creeping into his voice. Please, let me explain. Vanessa doesn't even matter. That was just stupid talk. You're the one I'm with. You're the one I care about. I picked up my suitcase. No, Ethan. I'm the one who was convenient. There's a difference. He grabbed my arm, not hard, but firm enough to stop me. Where are you going to go? This is our place. We have a lease. We have plans. I pulled my arm free, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. We never had plans. You had a timeline. And I was just filling space until it ran out. I walked out of that apartment and didn't look back. My best friend Jenna picked me up from the curb, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions until we were halfway to her place. When I finally told her everything, she just hugged me tight and said, "Good. Now let's make sure he regrets ever underestimating you." Moving into Jenna's guest room felt like stepping into a cocoon. The first week was a blur of tears, takeout containers, and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. She never once told me to move on or get over it. She just let me feel everything, the humiliation, the anger, the grief for a future that had never actually existed. But by the second week, something shifted. I woke up one morning with a clarity that felt almost physical, like someone had turned on a light in a room I'd been stumbling through in the dark. I looked at myself in Jenna's bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I become so small? When had I started measuring my worth by how little space I took up in someone else's life? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Pink_heart, click to react, fire, click to react, laughing, click to react, add reaction, edit forward more October 2, 2025. Ethan had called me temporary, but the truth was I'd been treating myself that way long before he put it into words. I'd been living like a guest in my own existence, careful not to ask for too much, not to expect too much, not to be too much. That version of me died in that hallway at the rehearsal dinner. The woman looking back at me now was someone new, someone who was done apologizing for taking up space. I'd been working as a junior editor at a mid-sized publishing house for 3 years, the kind of job where I showed up early, stayed late, and watched other people get promoted while I convinced myself I was being patient. My boss, Catherine, was a sharp woman in her 50s who had built her career on taking risks I was too afraid to take. That Monday, I walked into her office without an appointment and closed the door behind me. She looked up from her manuscript, surprised. "Kylie. Everything all right?" I sat down without being invited. "No, actually. It's not. I've been editing slush pile submissions and proofreading other people's acquisitions for 3 years. I have a degree in literature, I've ghostwritten 2 book proposals that both got 6-figure deals, and I'm still being paid like an intern. I want the associate editor position that's opening up next month, and I want you to know I'm the best person for it." Catherine leaned back in her chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled, small but genuine. "I was wondering when you'd figure that out. The position is yours. We'll make the announcement Friday." I blinked, stunned. "Just like that?" She shrugged. "Just like that. You've been doing the work for years, Kylie. You just finally decided to take credit for it. Welcome to the team." Walking out of her office, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the quiet, modest kind that comes from meeting someone else's expectations, but the bold, unapologetic kind that comes from meeting your own. That evening, I celebrated with Jenna over wine and pasta at her kitchen table. She raised her glass with a grin. "To Kylie Navarro, associate editor and absolute badass." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. To not being temporary anymore. The promotion came with a significant raise, enough that I could finally afford my own place. I found a small studio apartment in a neighborhood I'd always loved but never thought I could afford, the kind with exposed brick walls, huge windows, and a fire escape that overlooked a tree-lined street. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Completely, undeniably mine. I spent my first night there sitting on the floor eating pizza straight from the box, and it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived with Ethan ever had. But settling into my new life wasn't seamless. Ethan didn't disappear quietly. He started texting me a few days after I moved out, casual at first, as if nothing had happened. "Hey, found your book under the couch. Want me to drop it off?" I didn't respond. Then the messages got more frequent, more desperate. "I miss you. Can we talk?" Still nothing. "Kylie, please. I made a mistake. Vanessa means nothing. You're the one I want." I blocked his number after that. But blocking someone doesn't erase them from your life when you share mutual friends, a favorite coffee shop, and 2 years of history. I ran into him 3 weeks later at a bookstore in the neighborhood, the one I used to go to every Saturday morning. I was browsing the fiction section when I felt someone watching me. I looked up, and there he was, standing near the register with a book in his hand, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over, tentative, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Kylie. Hi. I didn't know you still came here." I kept my voice even, detached. "I do. You're the one who stopped." He flinched. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I glanced at my watch, more for effect than anything else. "I have plans." It wasn't a lie. I was meeting someone. Someone who made me feel like more than a placeholder. Someone who, in just a few short weeks, had reminded me what it felt like to be seen. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Plans with who?" I smiled, small and unbothered. "Does it matter?" He looked like he wanted to say something else, something sharp and cutting, but instead he just nodded stiffly and walked away. I watched him leave, waiting for the ache to hit, the sadness, the longing. But all I felt was relief. The man I'd spent 2 years loving had never actually existed. I'd been in love with potential, with maybes, with a version of him I'd invented to make the loneliness feel less suffocating. The real Ethan, the one who whispered cruel truths to his brother and treated love like a layover, that man was a stranger I was glad to be rid of. That afternoon, I met Noah at a small cafe near the river. We'd been introduced by a colleague at work, someone who thought we'd get along. She was right. Noah was a freelance photographer, the kind of person who noticed details most people missed, who asked questions that made you think rather than just filling silence. We'd been on 3 dates, nothing serious yet, but there was an ease between us that felt foreign after years of walking on eggshells. He smiled when he saw me, standing up to pull out my chair. "You look happy." I sat down, still buzzing from the encounter with Ethan. "I ran into my ex just now." His expression shifted, concerned. "And?" I shrugged, grinning. And I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. Noah laughed, shaking his head. "That's the best kind of closure." He was right. It was. I should have known that peace never lasts when someone's ego is wounded. Ethan had always been the type who needed to control the narrative, to be the hero or at least the misunderstood victim in every story. Losing me on my terms, without a fight, without begging him to reconsider, that didn't fit his script. So he rewrote it. It started small, things I almost didn't notice at first. A mutual friend, Lisa, mentioned casually over lunch that she'd heard Ethan and I had broken up because of my work schedule, that I'd become too focused on my career to make time for the relationship. I corrected her gently, told her the truth about what I'd overheard, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Ethan had gotten to her first, planted his version before I even had a chance to speak. Then came the social media posts. Nothing direct, nothing I could point to and say definitively was about me, but obvious enough that anyone who knew us would understand. A quote shared on his Instagram story about how some people change when they get a little success, how ambition can make people cold and unrecognizable. A vague post about being betrayed by someone he trusted, complete with a black and white photo of him looking pensively out a window. The comments flooded in with sympathy, with people telling him he deserved better, that he'd find someone who appreciated him. I watched it happen from a distance, my thumb hovering over the screen, tempted to respond, to defend myself, to tell everyone what he'd really said that night. But Jenna grabbed my phone out of my hand before I could. "Don't give him what he wants," she said firmly. "He's baiting you. The moment you respond, you're playing his game, and he's better at it than you are because he has no problem lying." She was right, but staying silent felt like swallowing glass. Especially when his campaign escalated. He started showing up at places he knew I'd be. The bookstore became impossible, so I stopped going. The coffee shop near my office, the one where I'd been meeting Noah, suddenly had Ethan sitting in the corner booth every Thursday morning, watching me over the rim of his cup like he had every right to be there. Noah noticed immediately. "Is that him?" he asked one morning, his voice low. I didn't turn around, didn't give Ethan the satisfaction of acknowledgement. "Yes." Noah's jaw tightened. "Want me to say something?" I shook my head. "No. That's what he wants. Attention, conflict, proof that he still matters to me. We'll just go somewhere else." But even as we left, I felt Ethan's eyes on my back, felt the weight of his resentment following me out the door. The worst part came 2 months after the breakup. I was at a publishing industry mixer, one of those networking events where everyone pretends to care about literature while really just trying to make connections. I'd been looking forward to it because Catherine had promised to introduce me to some of the senior editors from bigger publishing houses. My career was finally gaining momentum, and I wasn't going to let Ethan's petty games derail it. I was mid-conversation with an editor from a major New York imprint when I saw him. Ethan, walking through the door with Vanessa on his arm. She was exactly what I'd imagined, tall, polished, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in magazine spreads. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her dress probably cost more than my rent, and she wore the expression of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. My stomach dropped. The editor I'd been talking to noticed my expression shift. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Fine. Excuse me for just a moment." I started to walk toward the bathroom, anywhere that wasn't near them, but Ethan had already spotted me. I watched his face light up with something that looked like triumph, and I knew immediately that this wasn't a coincidence. He'd known I'd be here. He'd brought her here specifically to make a point. They made their way through the crowd, and I realized with growing dread that they were heading straight toward me. I had nowhere to go, no escape route that wouldn't look like I was running. So I stood my ground, lifted my chin, and waited. Ethan reached me first, that familiar smile plastered across his face, the one he used when he wanted something. "Kylie. Wow. Didn't expect to see you here." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. Vanessa stood beside him, looking me up and down with polite curiosity. She extended her hand. "Hi. I'm Vanessa. You must be Kylie. Ethan's told me so much about you." I shook her hand, keeping my expression neutral. "Has he?" She smiled, oblivious or perhaps just uncaring. "He mentioned you two dated for a while. It's always nice to meet someone from his past." From his past. The phrasing was deliberate, a gentle assertion of her place in the present. I looked at Ethan, saw the challenge in his eyes, the expectation that I'd fall apart, make a scene, prove that I was still affected. Instead, I smiled. "It's nice to meet you too, Vanessa. I hope you enjoy your time back in the city. Ethan speaks very highly of you." I turned to Ethan, my voice steady. "I should get back. Catherine's waiting for me." I started to walk away, but Ethan grabbed my elbow. "Wait. Can we talk for a second? Alone?" I pulled my arm free, keeping my voice low enough that only he could hear. "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. You made your choice. You chose her months before you even told me. So congratulations. You finally got what you wanted." His grip tightened for just a second before he let go. "You've changed." I met his eyes. "No. I just stopped pretending to be smaller than I am to make you feel bigger." I walked away before he could respond, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I found Catherine near the bar, and she took one look at my face and handed me a glass of wine without a word. But Ethan wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, he began reaching out to people in my professional circle. A colleague mentioned that Ethan had contacted her on LinkedIn, asking questions about me, about my projects, about whether I was seeing anyone. Another friend forwarded me a message he'd sent, claiming he was worried about me, that I'd been acting erratic since the breakup, that he just wanted to make sure I was okay. The worst came when he somehow got Noah's number. Noah showed me the text late one night as we sat on his couch. Thought you should know Kylie has a history of moving fast after breakups. Just looking out for you, man. She's got some issues she hasn't dealt with. Noah deleted it without responding, but I could see the question in his eyes, the tiny seed of doubt Ethan had planted. I told Noah everything that night. The whole story, from the whispered confession at the wedding rehearsal to the bookstore encounters to the industry mixer. I watched his face as I spoke, waiting for the moment when he'd decide I wasn't worth the drama, that the baggage I carried was too heavy. But when I finished, he just pulled me closer and said, "He's scared of you. That's what this is. He's terrified that you're thriving without him, so he's trying to drag you back down." He was right. But knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn. I was at work, reviewing manuscripts in my new office, the one with actual walls and a door that closed, when my assistant knocked hesitantly. "Kylie, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." Before I could ask who, Ethan pushed past her into my office. He looked disheveled, his shirt untucked, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. "We need to talk. Right now." I stood up slowly, keeping my desk between us. "You need to leave. This is my workplace." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Your workplace. Right. The job you got after you left me. Funny how everything worked out so perfectly for you, isn't it?" My assistant hovered in the doorway, uncertain. I gave her a small nod. "Call security, please." Ethan's face twisted. "Security? Are you serious right now? I just want 5 minutes. 5 minutes after 2 years, Kylie. That's all I'm asking." I crossed my arms. "You had 2 years, Ethan. You spent them lying to me. You don't get anything else." He stepped closer, and I saw something desperate and dangerous in his expression. "You ruined everything. Vanessa left me. She said I was too hung up on you, that I talked about you constantly. My friends think I'm pathetic. I lost my apartment because I couldn't afford it without your half of the rent. And you? You just moved on like I never existed." The security guard appeared in the doorway, a large man named Marcus who I'd chatted with in the elevator countless times. "Everything all right here, Ms. Navarro?" Ethan spun around. "Stay out of this. This is between me and her." Marcus didn't move, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the building." Ethan ignored him, turning back to me. "You think you're so much better than me now, don't you? With your promotion and your new boyfriend and your perfect little life. But I know the truth. You're nothing without me. I made you interesting. I gave you confidence. You were boring before me, and you'll be boring again." The words landed exactly where he intended them to, hitting every insecurity I'd spent months trying to bury. But this time, instead of shrinking, I felt something else rise up. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. "You made me interesting." My voice came out colder than I'd ever heard it. "Ethan, you made me invisible. You made me so small I almost forgot I existed outside of making your life easier. And you want to know the truth? The real truth? I've never been happier than I am right now, without you." His face flushed red. "You're lying. You're with him to make me jealous. You got that promotion to prove something to me. Everything you're doing is because of me." I walked around my desk, closing the distance between us until I was close enough to see the desperation in his eyes. You are not that important. You never were. I got this job because I earned it. I'm with Noah because he treats me like I matter. And I'm happy because I finally stopped wasting my time on someone who saw me as temporary. The word hung between us, sharp and deliberate. I watched it register on his face, watched him remember what he'd said that night, the confession he thought I'd never hear. That's what this is about? His voice dropped. I was drunk, Kylie. I was talking trash with my brother. It didn't mean anything. I shook my head. It meant everything. It was the truth you were too coward to say to my face. You were keeping me around until something better came along. Well, congratulations. She came along, and now she's gone, and you have exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Marcus stepped forward. Sir, I'm not asking again. Let's go. Ethan's hands balled into fists at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might actually do something violent, something that would cross a line he couldn't uncross. But then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. You'll regret this, he said quietly. When you're alone and you realize what you gave up, you'll regret it. I met his eyes one last time. The only thing I regret is not walking away sooner. Marcus escorted him out, and I heard Ethan's voice echoing down the hallway, still arguing, still trying to get the last word. My assistant peeked back in, her face pale. Are you okay? Should I call the police? I sank into my chair, my hands trembling with adrenaline. No. Just make sure he's off the property. And if he comes back, we call them immediately. She nodded and disappeared, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. I called Noah. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm and concerned. Hey, what's up? The words tumbled out, the whole confrontation, the threats, the accusations. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said simply, I'm coming to get you. We're going to the police station, and you're filing a report. I started to protest, to say it wasn't that serious, that I could handle it. But he cut me off gently. Kylie, he showed up at your job. He's been harassing you for months. This isn't just drama. This is stalking. Let me help you. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a Stark police station giving a statement to an officer who looked like she'd heard versions of this story 1,000 times before. I showed her the texts I'd saved before blocking him, the screenshots of his social media posts, the LinkedIn messages he'd sent to my colleagues. She took notes carefully, her expression neutral but not unkind. Has he ever been physically violent with you? I shook my head. No. But today, I thought he might. She nodded. We'll document everything. You can file for a restraining order if you want to pursue that route. Given the pattern of behavior you're describing, I think a judge would grant it. Noah sat beside me, his hand on my knee, steady and reassuring. I looked at the pile of evidence I'd accumulated without even realizing it, months of harassment reduced to printed screenshots and police report language. Yes, I said finally. I want the restraining order. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Within a week, I was standing in a courtroom, facing Ethan across a room that felt both too small and impossibly vast. He had a lawyer, a public defender who looked barely older than me and deeply uncomfortable with the case. Ethan himself looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and reading glasses, reviewed the evidence with careful attention. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice steady. I recounted the relationship, the breakup, the escalating harassment. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. Ethan's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, as a woman scorned who was exaggerating normal post-breakup contact. But the evidence spoke for itself. The texts, the emails, the workplace intrusion that had been witnessed by security cameras. When Ethan took the stand, he tried the same approach he'd used at my office. He claimed he was just trying to talk, to get closure, that I was overreacting. But under cross-examination from the prosecutor, his story fell apart. "Did you or did you not tell Ms. Navarro that she ruined your life?" the prosecutor asked. Ethan hesitated. I was upset. The prosecutor continued. "Did you or did not show up at her place of employment after she asked you to stop contacting her?" Another pause. "I just needed to talk to her." The judge removed her glasses, looking at Ethan with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Mr. Hayes, do you understand that showing up at someone's workplace uninvited after months of unwanted contact is not talking? That's harassment. That's intimidation." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. The judge continued. "Ms. Navarro has provided extensive documentation of a pattern of behavior that goes well beyond attempting to have a conversation. You've contacted her friends, her colleagues, her current partner. You've made her feel unsafe in her own workplace." The ruling came swiftly. Restraining order granted. Ethan was to stay at least 500 feet away from me, from my workplace, from my home. No contact, direct or indirect. Violation would result in immediate arrest. As the judge read the order, I watched Ethan's face crumble. Not with remorse, but with disbelief, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how wanting to talk had led him here, to a courtroom where a stranger in a robe was telling him he'd crossed lines he didn't even know existed. When it was over, Noah and I walked out into the cold afternoon air. I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until it was gone. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Free," I said finally. "I feel free." 4 months passed like a long exhale. The restraining order held, and Ethan faded into the background noise of my past, a chapter one no longer felt compelled to reread. I stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering if he was watching mine. The freedom that came with indifference was sweeter than any revenge could have been. My career flourished in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Catherine promoted me again, this time to senior editor, and I acquired my first bestseller, a debut novel from a writer who reminded me why I'd fallen in love with books in the first place. The author thanked me in her acknowledgments, called me the editor who saw her vision when no one else did. I cried reading those words, not from sadness but from recognition. I'd spent so long being invisible that being seen, really seen, still felt like a gift. Noah and I moved in together that spring. Not because we were rushing, but because it felt natural, inevitable in the best way. His photography studio became our living room gallery. My books lined every available surface. We cooked together, argued over movie choices, built a life that felt solid and real. He never made me feel temporary. Every day with him was a quiet promise that I mattered, not as a placeholder but as a choice he made over and over again. I ran into Marcus, Ethan's brother, at a coffee shop one Saturday morning. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But he walked over anyway. "Kylie, I owe you an apology. I should have said something that night. What he said about you, it wasn't right." I studied his face, saw genuine remorse there. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded. "For what it's worth, he's getting help now. Therapy. He finally admitted he has issues he needs to work on." I felt nothing hearing that news. Not satisfaction, not sympathy. Just quiet neutrality. I hope it helps him. The truth is, I don't think about Ethan anymore. Not with anger, not with longing, not even with the bitter satisfaction of knowing I won. Because I realized something important in those months after the courtroom. This was never about winning or losing. It was about refusing to be diminished. It was about recognizing that someone's inability to see your worth says nothing about your value and everything about their vision. He called me temporary because that's all he could see. But I was never the placeholder in that relationship. He was. He was the pause before my real life began, the lesson I needed to learn about what I deserved and what I'd never accept again. Some people come into your life to show you exactly who you don't want to become. I learned that kindness without boundaries is just self-betrayal. That being accommodating doesn't make you loved, it makes you convenient. That the right person won't make you audition for a role in their life while they wait for someone better to show up. Now when I look in the mirror, I see someone who knows her worth. Someone who walks into rooms and doesn't apologize for the space she takes up. Someone who understands that being chosen second was never the problem. Accepting it was. Ethan whispered to his brother that I was just temporary, that I was keeping the bed warm until his real life could begin. He was right about one thing. I was temporary. I was the version of myself who didn't know better, who thought love meant making yourself smaller. That woman is gone. And I've never been more grateful for anything in my life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.